In North Carolina, let's look at an everyday practical example of dual and designated agency. We need to keep in mind that if you are a dual agent, you are treating both buyer and seller equal, fair, impartial, the same. And what's very important is think about the scales need to be balanced. In dual agency, the firm treats the buyer and the seller both equal, fair, impartial, the same. The scales must be balanced. Therefore, you're representing both buyer and seller equal and fair. Which then the question comes up, if you do a CMA for a seller before you list the property and you list it, therefore that CMA you did for the seller should also be shared with the buyer client if you're a dual agent. If you did a CMA for the buyer client in dual agency, then that information needs to be shared with the seller. So there needs to be what? Equal, fair, and impartial treatment to both buyer and seller. That can be a tightrope to walk. However, a lot of agents need to remember the words equal, fair, impartial. However, some buyers will say, I want my own agent as my advocate. I do not want to share my buyer agent with anyone. I want an exclusive buyer agent to be my advocate only, even within the firm. And the answer would be designated dual, is where buyer and seller would allow designated dual. So the buyer client can be represented by a broker within that firm exclusively, and then the seller can be represented by a listing agent with that firm exclusively. So the real world example would be if you are doing designated dual agency, the fiduciary duties of skill, care, and diligence, and loyalty and obedience and disclosure you owe the buyer exclusively. Therefore, the seller would also have that type of fiduciary responsibility of trust. So those of you who say, can dual agency be practiced in North Carolina? According to the law, as long as you treat them both equal, fair, and impartial. But if that might not be advisable by either client, then designated dual agency would be an answer to provide the buyer to have an advocate within the firm, and the seller has their advocate too to represent them exclusively.